Hello and welcome to Metro AV Tech Tips. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
And we're trying a new bit of software, so if we didn't match up, we're sorry.
Well, it
goes on.
It's there.
So, as you can see, the new year has continued to start, and Adam and I are continuing on the CEDIA white paper on HDMI. Adam's over there playing with buttons. A little hot on the audio, were we?
Just a bit. Just a bit.
On the other hand, you guys get to see me in all of my glory temporarily.
For just a second.
So...
there we go. That's much better.
And Adam is back.
There we go.
So,
hey,
what kind of good things do we have happening this week, Adam?
Well,
don't forget to go through your normal
so
spiel.
first and foremost, like Brent is alluding to at this moment, as always, everybody, thank you so much for checking us out today. And like, share, subscribe, hit the little bell notification to let you know whenever we do go live, which of course is
every Wednesday at 3 p.m.
and every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern time on those times as well. So come back every week where we talk about stuff that we, honestly, just stuff that we want to talk about.
And actually, we have been discussing what we're going to be discussing, and Adam's got a good list of upcoming shows.
Yeah, it's honestly, so there's...
this has been exciting, and we've gotten a lot of feedback on this.
Yeah, again, in the description, there is a way for you to sign up to CEDIA's website and to download this document that we're talking about.
For free.
If you have not done it yet, I highly recommend doing it because not this week, but next week, we're going to be talking about the very last page that's on this, because the very last page is really, really, really helpful for
wait. Is it helpful?
It's, yes.
Okay, just checking.
Well, kind of. It's just barely.
Check,
yeah. So definitely go in there and download it, because the last page is actually it's a checklist. And the checklist by itself is worth it because there's really, really good information on this. Now, Brent, you and I were actually speaking with last week on what HDMI as a whole has done recently.
Yeah, we're formulating real short notes. I know some of you saw this on CE Pro's website.
Yes.
HDMI has changed the definitions of what a terminal is.
So basically, well, they've changed not so much what the terminal is.
The capabilities.
The capabilities. They've HDMI 2.0 is gone.
Completely. It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist anymore. HDMI 2.1. Or all of the features that were part of HDMI 2.0 are now HDMI 2.1. So it's now just one big thing, and actually...
which concerns me, because basically now HDMI 2.1 is essentially a tire. But we don't know if it's a Z-rated tire. Is it a high-performance tire? Is it a low-performance tire? Is it a wide tire? Is it a narrow tire? Is it a longevity tire?
Yeah.
It's just a tire.
So it used to be where you'd have HDMI 2.0, this stuff here, on its own, and it would be separate from 2.1, and that's where the red circle is there, and they were two separate things. Now, if you had an HDMI 2.1 device or display, normally how that would work is it was capable of backwards compatibility of picking up the HDMI 2.0 specifications and features. However, now what's happened is that HDMI as a whole has completely changed it to where now all the features of HDMI 2.0, so it's no longer just backwards compatible and onto there. It's now just part of all the feature sets that were part of HDMI 2.0, HDMI 1.4, HDMI 1.3. They went all the way back, didn't they?
2.1.
1.1. So basically, HDMI 2.1 is now just HDMI. It's just all of it. It's every part of it.
The drawback is, if you see a port that claims it's HDMI 2.1, you don't actually know what it's capable of.
Yeah.
Now, there were some issues with this going in, as most of you heard us talk about. Our first 8K set was the Samsung.
Yeah.
That when we went to plug the Xbox Series X into, would not support 4K 120.
Correct.
It's like, well, don't they all? Well, no.
No.
They don't.
And that was the same thing even in 2.0, because you had 4K displays, 4K 60, that it was capable of a 4K picture, 60 frames per second. It was even capable of like a 444, subsampling or just RGB, but it didn't do HDR. And so that was still an HDMI 2.0 display. It just wasn't an HDMI.
Right. So there's
HDR
a whole lot of hide the baloney, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, and actually, Gabs, you hit the nail on the head. Standards in the tech industry are now a joke. I'm speaking for myself here. I'm not speaking for
Metro.
For Metro as a whole, but yes, industry standards are now a joke because it's no longer there no longer is a spec because it's now just here's HDMI. They should have just gotten rid of 2.1
and just
said here's HDMI. And that's it. And so, but anyways, long story short,
we are formulating.
We're not.
Where we're
don't give anything
go.
away.
But where we're going to go, how we're going to explain and deal with this, because we anticipate a tremendous amount of tech support on this. Because, well, I bought the Xbox Series X and my TV says it's 2.1. It's not working, so it must be your cable's fault.
Right. Right.
Or your extender's fault, or your AVR's fault, or this fault. Well, maybe not.
Well, yeah, exactly. And here's the thing. Again, we've dealt with these problems before. We've dealt with the problems of, hey, it says that it's a 2.0 or 2.1 capable display.
Absolutely. In the early days of 2.0, we called it 4K.
4K, yeah, 4K.
Because it wasn't really, it's still a 2.0 jack. Yeah. But in some cases, it didn't even support HDCP 2.2.
Right. Symphony saying service calls are going to run rampant. Honestly, here's the problem. The service calls may not be a problem as much. It's when you first do the installation. Because if you don't realize what you're getting yourself into, you set everything up, you hook it up, and then you go to show the client, and the little thing in the top left-hand corner
doesn't match what he expects.
Doesn't say what they're expecting it to be. That's when you're going to have the problem. When you first get everything set up.
Or they replace a piece of gear and don't tell you.
That's different. Yeah, that's when the service calls are going to happen. So all that to say, because of what's happened, I would honestly say that this document is more important now than it was before.
At least you have some background to discuss with your customer and sound intelligent.
Right. The sad part about this is that portions of this document are now already out of date.
Null and void?
But not because technology has increased, but because
the application of the standard.
The bureaucracy of where it's come from has affected it.
On a happier note, so say we were discussing upcoming shows. I had planned to be in Barcelona.
And that's been
the first week of February, and if you guys haven't seen it, got bumped to May, or at least May.
Yep.
So I will be here, so Adam's recalibrating his it's my week only shows.
Yeah, no, that's not happening anymore.
Lucky me.
Yeah.
But he's got some great plans for us to get out of the studio, to get out in the real world.
Yep.
So there's a lot of good stuff coming up that Adam has planned.
I even have some
I'm
stuff.
I'm just here for the ride.
I was going to say, I even have some stuff out of the studio that you're not even aware of yet.
I'm just here for the ride.
I've got some really fun stuff in the works this year.
Thank you, Adam.
And so I'm super excited about this year. This is going to be great.
That doesn't cover today's topic. So, have you done the like, subscribe?
Yep, we've already done that. Well, of course.
And send
by
money.
the way, everyone who's watching us, if you're watching us from Facebook, let us know in the chat. We want to keep a track on that as well. And the metrics for Facebook versus YouTube are kind of interesting. So if you're watching us from YouTube, shout out in the chat to let us know that you're watching from there, because we'd like to see that happen as well. Because we're now streaming on both. We're on YouTube and we're on Facebook.
Country and Western.
Sure.
Before you don't get the movies, the whole Blues Brothers thing.
Should we start like a weekly, movie watching? You have to. Okay, here's your homework kind of a thing.
Well,
you have to go home and watch
I've tried that with you, and you don't.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, but it has to be something that I can watch with the family.
The Blues Brothers.
Okay,
you can watch that.
Yeah.
They have both kinds of music, country.
Gabs,
and Western.
I believe again, this is it. It just happened. Just moved over to May. I believe we are still going in May.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Assuming that it still exists.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, oh yes, we've already got our plane tickets.
Yeah.
We canceled our February flights, have redone for May, and...
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I got 7 years of Amsterdam. I'm not missing this. It's Barcelona. In fact, just as a shout out to the ISE show, which is part of CEDIA, by the way.
Yeah, correct.
It is.
Yeah.
Avixa and CEDIA.
Yep.
It is an incredible show, and not only do you get to see a foreign country and eat awesome foods, but the things you see there are different than what you see here. Mm-hmm. Their approach with DIN rails, the way they do lighting control, smart houses, it's different. I'm not saying that it's better or ours is better, but it's different, and you get some great ideas. I've come back with the original M3B.
Yeah.
Was because of my first trip to Amsterdam and what I saw in the train station.
Yeah.
Now, it only worked on 1080p, but for 4 years, that was a great and stable system.
Yeah.
So.
Michael is saying, Michael, it's great,
hey,
great
Mike.
to have you back in the chat. he says standards are not dead. People just need to understand what they mean.
Well, and that's
what we're working on.
And literally, fights are happening in the background here, and he's absolutely right. It's a matter of applying a way for people to understand what an individual product is. And one of the things HDMI pushes, rightfully so, is feature sets. They don't want to show, and they quit this at 1.4, they don't want to say a revision number. They want to know, okay, you're getting this feature, this feature, this feature, and this feature, which is an incredibly fair and accurate way to say this. As we know, an 8K set may not do 4K 120, and 4K 120 set may not do 8K.
Yeah.
So you need to check the boxes to know what it is you're buying.
Yeah.
And HDMI is pushing that hard, but it comes down to marketing departments in some cases fighting what they should be doing because obviously they want to sell product.
Fighting amongst ourselves.
Well, okay, not for nothing. We're arguing over how to present the data.
Yeah.
And it's just three of us.
Well, and the unfortunate part, the unfortunate
we
fact
agree
is,
on the data, just how do we present it?
And again, I need to stop. Let's do this then. So, let's get back on topic. So, for today, what we are talking about, let me hit this button here because that'll bring up our topic of the day, is part 3 for CEDIA review.
Well, almost.
Yeah, it's our third episode. Anyways, third episode. So,
it's actually part 2.3.
2.4.
2.34.
No, 2.41.
2.41.
Yep. So 2.41 is the video formats and bandwidth. So let's dive into this really quick.
No.
What do you think
we're in 3.4.1. That's alternate transports.
Alternative. Okay. So there are other ways to get an HDMI signal from the source device through a repeater to the display, other than an HDMI cable. Most of us already know what those are. M3B was one of our designs that we put together.
Put it out over RF, modulated.
Yep, and then there's also other modulation systems. There's also HD-base-T, which
and
of
other
course,
extender systems.
And other extender systems. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Were we one of the first that did HDMI over category?
Absolutely, but 2 category cables.
Right. Yeah. Which presented its own problems.
Well, yes and no. Our very first extender, made in America, was 2 cables, and it did the TMDS, the primary video functions, over 1 category cable, and EDID hot plug and 5 volt over a 2nd cable. So length was not an issue.
Right.
Guys that did a lot of component will remember when you had to make your custom length component cables pretty darn close in length, and we knew that was not going to happen.
Yeah.
Running multiple Cat5s, which is why HDMI did not go that direction when they went to 18K. They did the compression instead. Right. Because getting 2 pieces of cable to be the same length is not easy.
No, it's definitely not.
So what we did was 1080p over 2 of those, made in America, is a beautiful thing. But we did things a little differently, which kind of bit us in the butt. We did not use a 568 standard. Yeah. We used alphabetical colors, stripe lead solid. And everybody wanted to do a 568, which HD-based T and all the other extenders do. Yeah. Which just makes sense because everybody does networking.
Yeah. So one of the things that they talk about in here specifically, there's also AV over IP. Yep. But before we get to that, one of the things they talk about here are the conditions warranting, basically, the conditions that require the use of something other than an HDMI cable. And they have some really good ones in here. Distance too long. Desire to use pre-existing or newly run infrastructure. There's the environmental conditions and access, so like marine installations or burying it or something else. And there's design conditions, so for example, concealment in or on walls, live environments, outer diameter of long HDMI cables, things like that. So it's basically wherever an HDMI cable doesn't fit physically or doesn't fit design-wise.
Or if you're trying to do one source to God knows how many displays with over IP.
Yeah, exactly. So there's one of the ones in here that they're talking about, of course, is distance too long. Now, with the advent of AOC, or not really advent, but the
growth of
the growth of AOC, really kind of fixes that part of that problem because going far enough. In most cases now you can use a Velox, one of ours, our Velox fiber. It's off camera over there, that's why I'm pointing at it.
So you're pointing to nowhere?
I'm pointing to nowhere. For them it looks like I'm just pointing off into the distance. But basically the use of that, we're going up to 300 meters?
Over 300 feet.
300 feet. So with a cable like that, you could go pretty much as far as most
Any of the
cases that you
extenders
need.
will, other than a fiber extender.
Correct, which that can go much further. But I will say that the use of an extender over either pre-existing stuff, like if I can't run an HDMI cable because the wall's already up and or whatever else, but there's a Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable that's in place that I can use.
You're ready to go.
I'm good to go, so long as, of course, it meets the rest of the criteria necessary for that type of video transmission.
Will cover at the end of this discussion.
And actually, if you want more information on that, go back and watch our live stream that we did where we talked about HDBaseT.
And infrastructure.
The high points of that basically are nothing shorter than 60 feet.
Short is worse than long.
It's technically 20 meters, which is a little bit longer than 60 feet. It's not a perfect world, so that means you could probably get away with a little bit of a shorter cable, like a 50, but don't test it. 60 feet, 20 meters is really as short as you need to go with it.
Here's our concern on that.
Yeah.
Anybody that's spent any time with me knows that I speak loudly, and over time it does grate our nerves. And when the transmitter...
No.
Now you're lying.
Yeah.
When the transmitter is outputting what's meant to go distance to something that's not, it's hot coming into it.
Yes.
And it may work for a while,
yes.
but over time, it's going to break stuff down.
Yep. Yeah.
It's just not a good idea.
Yeah, just not good to do that. The other things, of course, are we are huge proponents for not using the pass-through style RJ45.
Oh, yes.
On anything. I mean, honestly, even on networking, while network is packetized or packetized and whatever. Even though it's that way, you're still going to have better network connections. You're still going to have faster network connections,
more reliable,
and more reliable, less data loss, packet loss, if you don't use those. Just again, the theory is good. It's just in practice, it doesn't work as well.
Look, it's not the terminal. It's not any specific item. It's the combination of things, because most people do not maintain their tools as well as they should.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that,
and that's what it comes down to.
What we found is that it's not even necessarily that they're not maintaining it like they should. It's that the tool itself degrades at an alarming rate. So where even someone who normally does take care of their tools at by a great deal would be hard pressed to replace the die that actually cuts it,
and the compression die.
Yeah, just in order to do that, you'd have to replace it pretty much after every job. Some of the things, of course, also when you're running any kind of extender in a system like that is don't use punch downs, keystones, don't use couplers. Don't use anything else. Basically, straight shot. One straight cable all the way through.
It is network cabling, but it's not a network system.
Correct. Yeah.
So don't treat it like a network.
No. And again, these are good practices even for networks, even for just IP networks. Michael, he won't be able to see you. There's a weird glitch to where the YouTube comments don't transfer over to Facebook.
We don't know why yet.
So there's... what
does Michael say?
He's replying to a joke.
So was it a good joke?
It's a joke.
Okay.
We'll say that. Okay, so when you go, you do have options if you can't get an HDMI cable in a certain location. Now again, if you read the white page from HDBaseT directly, and HDB is not the only type of HDMI over category wire
just the most prevalent.
It's the most prevalent. It's the one that most everyone is using. The white page on that says 20 meters is the minimum distance. The maximum distance, of course, varies from system to system. But
the quality of your wire.
Yeah, and the quality of wire. For the most part, 100 meters to 120 meters is basically what you're looking at for that. The other thing that they say is that you can have a break in the line if you use like a punch down or a keystone, so long as it's within 5 meters of either side. So if it's 5 meters from the send side or 5 meters from the receive side,
still don't do it.
Still don't do it if you can get away from it. And we understand that there's certain extenuating circumstances that you can't get away from.
But try not to.
Yeah.
It's like wireless. We get it. They're just
don't.
Sometimes you got it, but if you can, don't.
Yeah. So I think that kind of covers that type of alternative transport. Well, there's fiber, there's whatever else.
Well, and the IP is a networking.
Right.
And there are certainly advantages to doing, particularly if you're doing a commercial application.
Commercial, large, residential, even large commercial, especially for the IP portion to it.
Assuming you do everything else properly, which means a high quality switch, managed switch.
Yep.
And I would recommend getting the whole package from somebody that does all the setup for you, delivers it pre-made, then you just deploy it.
Yep.
because it can be a daunting situation trying to get everything properly set up and get matched.
Yep.
It's worth paying the couple of companies that do that.
Yeah.
To do it. If I were doing it, I would pay somebody other than me to pre-configure it and just I know, okay, this goes there, this goes there. Really what you do with your jobs anyway when you're planning them.
Yeah. It's definitely worth it because you do get the ability to just have, my favorite thing about those types of systems is that you can have any source device at any location. It doesn't matter if the source device, so take a gaming console, take an Xbox. You can have the Xbox show up on any display while still having the Xbox localized to like a living room, but still have it be able to show up on the other displays without having to run cables all the way back to a central location. So long as they can get out from there, they're good.
What is the latency on a system like that compared to a cable?
They're getting better. I don't know the numbers, but they are getting better.
Your experience, the audio trying to get it broke out was problematic.
Yep, you're still going to run into that if you talk to, I believe if you talk to anybody that's used like the MOIP systems or the Just Up Hour systems or anything like that, I think you're going to run into something similar. But it is getting better. It's not great, but it is getting better. So there is that.
That's what the Beatles said.
Yeah.
Got to admit it's getting better.
So let's talk about bandwidth.
Ooh, I like bandwidth.
Bandwidth is my favorite topic. It really, really is.
Because it tells you so much without telling you anything.
Well, because the thing is that with bandwidth, and this is anybody following along, this is part 2.4.1. We're now in 2.4. This bandwidth is the thing that says it's the
roadway.
It's the roadway. Like it
how
doesn't
much
care.
traffic can you carry?
Yeah. Are you driving a Miata? Are you driving a big semi truck? Are you driving a pickup truck? Are you driving a Jeep? It doesn't care, because so long as the weight of that vehicle
doesn't
exceed the road's capabilities, then it will work. It will get across. Now, that's in particular to chipsets and to cabling, because those two, the bandwidth is what's really important for those two things. In most cases, cabling does not care about whether you have VRR or HDR10 plus or
Dolby Vision
or variable refresh.
And assuming it's built correctly, ARC or eARC, it doesn't care.
It really doesn't care, because all it is
passively
it doesn't care. The active portion to it is looking for either a TMDS or an FRL video stream.
And it may not like sending stuff one way or the other, but and that comes down to electronics in it. But
correct.
It's still the roadway.
But in most cases, it doesn't care. So the bandwidth, though, is important because everything that you do with a video signal creates or takes away bandwidth. Go back and watch. I'll have to find the video and put a link to it in the description eventually. Go back and watch our video on bandwidth. I'm very proud of that video myself, actually, because I built the calculator for that. And I really am proud with how good it came together and all that kind of good stuff. But go check out that video because we talk a lot about it. The high points to that video are basically this. You have feature sets that are additive, that add bandwidth. Then you also have feature sets that are subtractive. They take away bandwidth, which you really use up until one HDMI. Up until what used to be known as up until what used to be known as HDMI 1.4.
Is that like artist? The Prince?
Prince.
The artist used to be known as Prince?
Who used to be, he's now
the
just a
HDMI
symbol.
standard that used to be known as HDMI 2.0?
Yeah. So up until what used to be 1.4, there really wasn't.
That one still exists. That's still on the website. 1.4a is still on the HDMI website.
It is.
2.0 is gone.
Yeah, 2.0 is gone. But and everything before 1.4 is gone also, right? Okay. But 1.4 is still around.
Yes.
For some weird. Stay tuned. We're going to come up with some way to describe all of this in a nice, neatly tied bow and all that kind of. Yeah, we're still working on it. Anyways, moving on.
There are fisticuffs involved.
So 1.4, there really wasn't a whole lot of necessity to subtract from the bandwidth.
No, because at 10 gig, the only thing that really pushed it prior to was 3D, and that still kept you in the 7.5 range.
Right. So there really wasn't a need for subsampling.
No, it was 444. 1080p was 444.
Exactly. You had 444 all the way through.
But you only had 8-bit video.
Yep. And then we then added on more feature sets, which gave us better picture overall, higher frame rate, deeper bit depth. We had
more color.
More color. We had
expanded audio channels.
Expanded audio, HDR, all those good things with it.
The HDR
Go back
doesn't add
and watch our HD. Well, correct. Go back and watch our HDR video. That was yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
That was fun. Yeah, David.
Was that David?
David, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, David. So, anyways,
Sorry.
So
That one was awesome, but there's so much in the early days we did not know about HDR because we assumed that it did add bandwidth.
yeah.
It didn't.
So in 241, in this document, they talk about video formats and bandwidth. So specifically what they're talking about is what used to be known as the standards for this. So for 9 gigabits, now they jumped right to 1.4 because let's be honest.
Who cares?
The stuff before 1.4, yeah. So with 1.4B is what they've labeled here, you had 3 channels of 3 gigabits each. So we wound up with 9 gigabits per second total, right? So with the 9 gigabits per second total, what that got us was anywhere from 480i and 480p all the way up to 1080p and on that with an 8-bit, and we had 12-bit on that, didn't we?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Is it 420?
It's 422. Yep.
So we had 9 gig,
yeah,
4K 60, 10-bit. I don't think so.
No. You had and at 9 gigs, you had 4K 60, 8-bit 420.
Okay.
No
Right.
HDR. It was
No deep color.
introduced. It was introduced in HDMI 2.0 when it was first released, and it was kind of one of those backwards compatible, systems like ARC and eARC, where if you could have a 1.4 chipset that used that 4K,
They could pass it forward on.
They could go ahead and do it. So they went from that to 18 gigabits per second. We doubled the amount of bandwidth allowed, and here's the thing, that's the important part. It's the amount of bandwidth that was allowed in that spec, right? We were allowed to use up to 18 gigabits per second with HDMI 2.0.
3 by 6.
What used to be known. You had 3 by 6, that's right, because we have 4 channels for TMDS, right? We've got D0, D1, D2, and D3. Did I
Yes.
get that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
you did.
D0 was the clock?
Every time I say this, I get it backwards.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It was either D0 or D3 is where the clock is.
I think
But
it was
3
D3,
channels,
but it could have been D0.
You had red, green, and blue. So each channel had its own color. Then you had the 4th channel, or the last channel, or the first channel, whichever one it is. But regardless, was the clock. Now that clock, of course, was just keeping everything in time, right? I was going to snap because you said it was getting harder for you to snap and everything last time.
It's
Yeah. So when you're talking digital information. Michael Ice is saying they have lots of bandwidth in New Zealand.
bandwidth.
Yeah. So every type of digital communication has a clock because it has to be able to tell you when
So
everything is
non-digital.
up and when it's down.
Serial commands have a clock.
Yep. Because you have to be able to tell
RGB.
it the amount of time that it takes for it to get up. Now,
When you look at component, there's a clock. It sits on the green.
yeah. So you have to have a clock. And that's what it was. Now, the important part when they jumped from 2.0 to 2.1, 2 things happened. One, we had a huge increase in features. I mean, I think we had more features added to HDMI in 2.1 than in any other.
More power-hungry features.
Yes.
Space-hungry.
Yes, bandwidth-hungry. Yeah. So we added so many extra things into that one, but they changed the amount of bandwidth possible from 18 gigs up to 48 gigs.
Currently.
Now, Brent, how many devices are out there that actually do 48 gigs?
For the consumer, I believe the current answer is 0. I believe we top out at 40 with the Xbox Series X. That's consumer available.
I believe you're correct because I think even the gaming graphics cards for PCs, I believe that they're
We've
still
been down
locked
this
at
road.
40 gigs. Yes.
They're still locked in.
So
now, there are 48 gig devices out there.
Yes.
But they're not consumer products.
Most of those are like testing equipment.
Right.
The Meridio 7, I think is
I'm not sure if it's 40 or 48. Because it's FPGA based. It could be 48.
Yeah, we'll have to ask the Meridio team. So basically, with this here, what you have with the increase to 2.1 is you had an increase in bandwidth, which means that the cabling. That's why we went from, oh yeah, no problem. You've got what do we wind up at? Like 12 or 13 meters for 4K for 2.0, and you got the full bandwidth pretty much.
Well, 10 passive.
10 passive, yeah.
With the gigabit accelerator, 21 meters on the VLOX.
Yes.
17 on MHX.
Yes.
12 on Vanco.
Yeah. And so with that, you were able to do a long distance on a passive cable, and even with even a little bit longer with like our gigabit accelerator. Now, When we jump up to 48 gigs, again, 48,
it falls fast.
The bandwidth. See, this is what's interesting. The bandwidth doesn't change the speed.
No, it just changes how wide the road is.
Exactly. It's the amount of data can travel at one time.
And you know, and we've been down this road before on our network and bandwidth shows. But when you know, whether it's your cell phone company or your cable company talking about, oh, the speeds are so much faster.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that the speed of the data is any faster, it's that more data can arrive at the same point in time.
Vis-a-vis, you basically get more faster because you're able to get more at one time. Yes, but no.
Now we're carrying loads of dirt with a dump truck instead of a pickup truck.
Well, it's like, look, you still have the speed limit is still the speed of light through a copper medium, right? It's still that speed limit.
The closest analogy is you're going to transport dirt from your house to your farm.
Right.
And you're going to get on the interstate.
Yep.
The interstate has a speed limit of 70.
Yep.
Now you're probably going to do 80 anyway.
Yeah.
But if you do it in your pickup truck, or excuse me, your Jeep, you want to carry dirt in your Jeep to the farm.
Right.
5 miles away. That's a whole lot of trips to carry 1 yard of dirt.
Yeah, I need a lot of Jeeps to do that.
So it's taking you a long time to do it. Whereas on the other hand, you get a dump truck, throw a yard in, it's one trip.
Right.
At 70 miles an hour.
Right.
So essentially, the totality of what you want is there once.
Yeah.
So the speed is effectively faster in perception.
Yep.
But the vehicle is not moving any faster on the roadway.
Right. So bandwidth is my favorite topic when it comes to HDMI. So I highly recommend going back and watching that video that we have on bandwidth. It's one of our TechTips videos. Go back and check out that. The next part is section 242 on compression. I'm going to glance at this and we're going to move past it because, perfectly honest, I don't know enough about compression when it comes to this. Now, unless they're talking about, they're talking about display stream compression.
Which we do know a fair amount.
Okay. Well, you know a lot more than I do about it.
HD-Base-T uses the heck out of it, and so does HDMI in 2.1, because let's face it, they understood there was going to be roadway problems. And the vast majority of people cannot see any artifacts based on this.
Yeah.
And the assumption is, look, if you've got a 40 or 48 gig signal, do you actually need to get 48 gigs there to show a picture that is very acceptable?
No.
You probably don't.
No. Yeah.
So with display stream compression, and there's a couple of other formats out there vying to be number 2.
Yeah.
They can take stuff out of the data, same as, and shrink the package down dramatically, get it there. When you open it up, it just kind of blows back up.
Right.
And visually lossless, it looks the same on a 65, 75, 85, probably until you get above 110.
Right. Now, the fun thing about display stream compression is it's kind of like HDR. It's system agnostic to where it doesn't care if it's being traveled down an HDMI port or, like what Michael Heiss just said, is DisplayPort or Thunderbolt. Because it actually doesn't care. It's used by a lot. You can watch an HDR video.
As long as you've got encode decode at both ends.
Exactly.
It's going to be okay. And thank you again, Michael.
Yeah. So
by the way, he was one of the architects of this paper.
Yes. Was he?
So,
yes. Yes, he was.
So it's wonderful to have him on here.
Yes, it is. So from there, we've got 243, which is when we get into metadata.
Now, metadata is interesting because metadata tells you a whole lot of stuff. And most of our world's metadata is the stuff that pops up on your phone with the album cover, the art when you're listening to Pandora or Spotify or one of those.
Yep.
That's what we tend to think of as metadata.
Yeah.
But metadata covers a lot more in our world.
Yeah.
Including HDR.
Yeah.
And as mentioned earlier, in the early days prior to the release of HDR, our assumption was, look, HDR is going to take more bandwidth because now we're doing more stuff with the signal.
Right.
We were wrong.
Yeah.
We didn't know. Turns out that it just sends a command that tells the TV, do this when it receives the data. So it's not manipulating the data beforehand. That's done in the panel.
Michael, I didn't think you were. I double-checked, and I didn't have time to double-check it and see. Michael did not work on this one.
I thought his name was on it.
Not this one. You're thinking of
I'm sorry,
Mr.
Michael.
Joel Silver.
Silver.
Joel Silver was on this one, I believe. No, David. You're thinking of David. David was on this one. You keep getting Michael and David mixed up.
I do.
I mean, they're both angels, so I mean, there is that.
Well, they certainly both helped us.
You know, yeah. And angels for doing that, for helping us, right?
And we need it.
Well,
Go ahead, say it.
you do.
I'm
Anyways,
old. I'm going to die soon.
I also need help. But not for the same
Particularly
reasons
with math.
Well, not for the same reasons that he needs help, but there is that.
Particularly with math.
So metadata, it covers a few things. Now the metadata is the way that they have it listed here is that it is not mandatory for a display to read and apply the metadata that accompanies it. So here's what it is. EDID is basically the display telling the source, this is what I can do. The metadata is all the information that the TV may or may not be able to do, and it's sending that. It's the instructions for how to use the information, how to use the information that's coming in, right? It's basically what it is. So, like, we'll use HDR as an example. The metadata for HDR rides. We know this from our previous video that we had with David. The metadata for HDR rides on the outside of the display. And what I mean by that is that the pixels, when you look at this display, this is an 8K display, but let's pretend it's 4K. When you look at a 4K display, you have 3840 columns and by 2160 rows. Now, here's the thing. That's just the video that you see. That's the portion that you actually see. There's actually a range of pixels outside of what you actually see. Back in the days of CRT and everything else, we would see that sometimes where the video itself would scroll up just a little bit and you would see it on the bottom or the top.
Overscan.
It was the overscan.
Because you had data there.
Yeah, and that data
And you would
helped
adjust,
the TV.
you could actually adjust how the photons displayed that, so you wanted it just out of the visible range.
Right. And so that information is still being used. That setup, that style is still being used today. Wow, are we already at that time?
I don't know.
There we are. So because of that, when the information is running on the outside, it's still always there. So that's why you were saying earlier that HDR does not add more data to the video.
To the individual video feeds.
Because whether or not you're using the HDR information that's there or not, it's still there. It's still happening. Whether or not the content has HDR or not, the area where the data would be is still there. It's just not being used. So if you have a display that's not going to use the HDR portion of the metadata, it just ignores that. It doesn't have to use that information. So
However,
they talk
it's
about
encouraged if that's the case, you put your source on standard, not enhanced.
right. So they talk about video timings, colorimetry or gamut, and bit depth, static or dynamic metadata for HDR, max content light level, maximum frame average light level, tone mapping instructions, all that kind of good stuff. Which tone mapping instructions, man, there is so much good information with HDR. Seriously, if anybody has even just an inkling of, man, I want to learn more about this stuff, do it. There's so much really good information, and if for no other reason than just I need someone else to nerd out with and talk to about this stuff, because there's some really cool stuff happening. Anyways, we have frame transport modes in HDMI 2.1, which include VRR, QFT, and QMS. So that would be things like...
And BMOF as well. Go on.
So, moving on. This was mostly David. I don't speak Australian, Michael says. So we'll pass that along. So frame transport modes in HDMI 2.1, including VRR, QFT, and QMS. This is really cool here as well because the metadata for VRR is variable refresh rate.
I knew you were going to get
I had to catch up with, my mouth had to catch up with my brain, or vice versa. So the variable refresh rate, what's happening essentially is that the console, the game console, or the PC, if you're playing PC games, if it can't keep up with the data or the
changes in the data.
Yeah, no, the changes in the video that you're watching. So let's say you're playing a video game, the world that you're in the video game has to be rendered, and the time that it takes for it to render that may not be able to keep up with the actual transmission of the video to the display.
Because the more complex the scene, the more action going on, particularly when you get into third party.
The longer it takes to build it and to actually
more
render
detail.
it out, more details happening. So if it has to slow down, so if you're playing 120 frames per second, if you lock it into 120 frames per second, you may wind up with more of like a jitter or something that happens with, not jitter, jitter is the wrong term for it, but more of just a blocky effect, versus if you use the VRR, which is going to help keep the video smooth as it slows down the frame rate.
Now, it may give up some stuff in the process, because you may give up color, you may give up some HDR capability on the new gaming HDR.
Right. There's also QFT, which is Quick Frame Transport, and QMS, which I believe, if I go back again, hey, it's all in this document. QMS, Quick Media Switching. That's another.
See, that's not new though. It used to be called QuickPort. Now it's a more advanced version of it.
Okay.
And it created its own havoc in the early days. But
yeah, I mean, it's gotten a little bit better now, anyway. So.
I would assume so. We haven't experienced enough of it yet to know.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what we haven't done yet? We haven't gone into part 3.
We haven't even gotten that far yet. Well, the last part of it was HDR, but I think we talked about that enough.
We did.
Lip sync correction is another portion to it as well, and audio. So 244, 245, and 246, as I throw everything around, are the last bits of it. And just to touch base on that really quick, the audio portion to HDMI. Every type of audio stream that's out there can be used on a different medium other than HDMI, except for Dolby Atmos, as well as I believe DTS, the 3D, the oral.
It required an HDMI connection, not
whatever that's called.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oral.
Oral. Aura.
AURAL.
Oro 3D. Yeah. Object-based and channel-based. So Dolby Atmos and DTS:X and Oro 3D. Those three you have to use HDMI because of basically what it comes down to is bandwidth for one. Even though it's not that much compared to the video portion to it itself, it's still a lot. So HDMI really makes it easy for it to work on that, but mostly because of HDCP. They want to make sure that it's locked in and that
protected.
Content protection. Okay, let's move on to section 3. Do you know what that means? I'm not going to say it until I know what it is.
Which one am I looking at?
Up one.
I do not know what that means. So, Michael, you're going to have to fill us in on 2.1
SBTM.
SBTM, because I don't know that one. That's not in the... Is it?
You know, it might be. It might be. I haven't looked at it anyways. But anyways, no, actually, pardon me. It's a little bit further up.
Oh.
Do you know that one?
I do not.
No? Okay, switch places. Okay, we're moving on to part 3 on this document.
And that's a big 3.
Yeah, a big 3. So part 3 is HDMI system design. This is my second favorite thing when it comes to HDMI because this is what, as an integrator, we do. HDMI system design. We design systems, put it together for our clients or our customers, and in a way that will work for their needs. That's the whole idea behind system design, right? It's my second favorite thing to do. If you are running into...
What is the most important thing in system design for you?
Ooh, we've had this discussion before.
I know what my answer is.
So, are we talking conceptually, or are we talking physical items?
As I'm looking at, when I'm designing a system for a customer, what is the most important thing in my mind for that system?
That it functions in the way that I told my client that it would function.
No.
No? What about for
Reliability.
you? Reliability.
Reliability.
Well, it functions in the way that you told your customer it would function.
Reliability is number one, meaning every time they turn it on,
it works.
You know, we're not arguing programming inside of your control system of
course. Yeah.
What I'm saying is that every time you turn it on, the hot plug, the 5-volt trigger, the EDID, everything that has to happen for that picture and sound to lock in and present itself at the desired resolution, frame rate, and audio format.
That box.
Is what happens.
Yeah.
So, reliability to me is number one.
Well, I mean, that kind of talks about your whole mantra for building all these HDMI repair tools.
And that was not the intent of my statement, but yes.
No, yeah, correct. But it's interesting that your philosophy for that is conceptually visible.
Here's the thing.
All these goodies.
The vast majority of people, the vast majority of integrators that are not ISF qualified may or may not be able to see the differences in minor setting changes.
Right.
But if it ain't working, they can see that.
Yep. You got a black screen? It's
not
working.
They can see that.
Yeah. A pink overlay?
They can see that one.
Yeah.
So my first concern when I'm doing everything is not pushing the envelope to the point.
Right.
I mean, it's nice that you have that if that customer understands what he's asking for and understands the potential pitfalls, and most do not, of what he's asking for. Those are fun jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are, because you're reaching out there, and as long as the customer gets it, and we both have one that's willing to take some chances.
Yes.
But most really are not. So consistency, reliability, that they walk up, they hit that button, and it works. Now, again, we're not going to argue programming or control systems.
Yeah. Well, and that also
the HDMI
plays an effect into. There's a lot of dealers that we talk to, actually not that often, but there's quite a few dealers that will randomly get a problem and they'll give us a call. But the way that they design their systems is cookie cutter, but that's not the way that it's viewed. It's not so much that it's cookie cutter, it's just ensuring stability.
Yes.
When you have a system
what
that
they're building is repeatable systems.
Exactly. And so if you can say, hey, this LG TV with this Marantz receiver with that Xbox Series X will always work using this HDMI, this remote, this setup, and it works.
This input.
99% of the time. Guess what? If you have a client that says, hey, I want an 8K TV and I want an Xbox Series X, guess what? I'm going to go back to that system and recreate it in that new client's home.
Yes.
Yeah. It just because when you recreate that repeatability, it just works. You ensure, well, one, you make the client happy because it works. Two, you make yourself happy because you're making money. You don't have to go back and fix anything.
Your wife's not upset because you're not leaving on Friday night when she expects you to go to dinner.
Well, and so long as you're not doing firmware updates to screw everything up
on a Friday,
in theory, it should continue to function the way that it's supposed to until something does actually break. Which it's electronics, and it does happen. So.
But that's the goal. That, without question, reliability is number one on my list.
So my favorite thing about this that they say in this one, this is section 3.1. Identifying and documenting AV formats. And I'm going to read directly from this because I love the way that they describe this. All desired video and audio formats to be supported by an AV system should be identified during client interviews and documented to determine the required HDMI system bandwidth. So, like I said before, bandwidth is my number one favorite thing to talk about when it comes to HDMI because it is so incredibly important.
Okay, that is a phenomenal statement.
It covers so much.
And when I used to do boats, you would do all the current draw. You would add a voltage current draw for every item in the boat to determine what power supply, what gauge, all that. But you knew basically, I have a finite amount of space. They're going to put a blender in. They're going to put, okay, we have to build in some extra current up on the bridge because they might add or change machines. But I think that's incredibly optimistic viewing how the world is changing so quickly.
Yeah.
In video formats, it's like, well, I need to support 48. I mean, that's my statement right out of the gate.
Right.
I need to be able to support anything that's offered within the 48 gig envelope.
Yeah.
Feature set wise and bandwidth wise.
Yeah.
So that's my statement on that one.
Gabs, do me a favor. When you post things to the chat, it doesn't come through correctly like that, especially when you post like a link or something. Send it to either my email address, adam.rogers@metroav.com, or you can actually text it to this number here, the 386 number.
We can receive text on those
Yes,
numbers?
we can.
Oh.
By the way,
Wow.
if I believe you are out of you're somewhere outside of the States, I believe it's +1 to send it to the States. So do that. Send that to me that way because then I can see it and see what's going on, and maybe we'll comment about it on the next episode.
Yeah, see, honestly, and that's a wonderful statement, but that seems kind of redundant for what we do because, sir, what do you want to do? I don't know, maybe an Xbox, a Roku, an Apple TV. So basically, you need to design, in my opinion, for whatever's available to the consumer at any point in time.
And if you can't, making sure that they understand what they're not getting.
You know, and that's going to be limitations either by they're asking for more than any existing infrastructure can support.
Sure.
And it does happen.
Sure.
You know, for years, it's like, I got to have 4K 6444. It's like, well, no, you can't.
Yeah. No.
Just because the infrastructure, the HDMI spec.
4K 6444, you can get that in 8-bit. You just can't get it on 10 or 12-bit.
I want 10-bit.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, why would I want 8-bit? If I'm going to watch 8-bit, I'll watch 1080p.
Yeah, exactly. And again, we go back to the whole thing where it's like, well, what they should... Anyways, moving on. So the other favorite thing about this document, and I'm speeding through this now a little bit because we're getting close to our time, the first part that they make a point of is computers as source devices.
I'm not a big fan of those.
So here's the thing.
They don't always work with AVRs correctly.
Yeah, they don't work. Here's the thing. HDMI on a computer is great when it works because it's a simple connection to a display of some kind, and it's great. Here's the problem. In many cases, That number won't do WhatsApp. Shoot me an email. That'll be the easiest one. But
do you have a WhatsApp?
I believe I do. I just don't remember what the thing is for it. But anyways, moving on. So computers, the problem with computers is that in many cases, computers try to do too much.
Yep, because if you have a computer through an AVR to a TV, it's really not looking at the AVR's capability, it's looking at the display's capability.
Yep.
And the display is going to say, yeah, I can do that, no problem.
Yep.
But the AVR is going to have a fewer, the AVR matrix, whatever,
right,
is going to have fewer video support options typically.
Yeah.
Than a display is.
A computer's also going to try to do other resolutions that are outside of normal CE resolutions.
Right. What the AVR is going to do.
Which I believe they actually talk about that in this here. But they, the problem that you run into is that they try to do something weird that some displays just will not display at all. They don't even try to convert the sizing or anything like that to make it work. They just won't display it at all.
And if you want to throw
AVRs
it into
do the
splitter,
same thing. Yeah, splitters, AVRs, any kind of repeater device in the middle. And again, if you go back to an earlier episode, we talked about the differences. You had your source device. A repeater is anything in the middle. So it could be an extender, could be an AVR, could be a splitter, a switch, whatever it is. Then you had your sync device. You had your display. So when it comes to a computer, if you can get away from doing a computer over HDMI, do it. I know that you have the applications where you have a conference room or a pulpit or something like that where it's easy because the laptop itself just has an HDMI connection on the side of it. So there's your connection, you're good to go. If you can get away from it, get away from it. Because
if you can't get away from it, documentation and settings for the laptop are very critical.
Yeah. One of the easy things that you can do now is there's so many devices out there that will take a wireless connection and mirror whatever is on the display of the laptop.
Apple TVs, Rokus.
Apple TVs, Rokus. There's even ones dedicated to the Infocom market where you don't even have to have a network connection. It just has to have a wireless Wi-Fi connection to it. So you don't have to worry about putting somebody on like a guest network or a private network or something else. So definitely watch out for that stuff. Design guidelines. So the first part of this one, they say comprehensive design guidelines. This actually plays into the last page a little bit where we go through the checklist stuff. But it says, first things, all desired video and audio formats to be supported by the system should be identified and documented. Again, using your style of design choice, you would go through and say, okay, if they're on an Apple TV, they have capabilities of watching 4K 30. Well, technically, they have 4K 60 options.
They have 4K 60 444. It's still there.
Yeah, it's there.
Buried.
And just be aware that
they have the 2.1 chipset in them now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So they're still somewhere under 30, but that could change any day now with the firmware update.
We'll watch out, find out if the client's bringing a legacy device with them. So if they have something that's older, like
which
a 1080p.
Which can add its own problem because not every set supports lower resolutions.
And keep in mind also, watch out for the devices that are component devices and you're using those component to HDMI adapters.
They don't always work. The clock may not sync.
The clock may not sync, and actually what's interesting is the clock isn't syncing sometimes because if you're watching like a DVD, a lot of times the menu is a different resolution than the actual video you're watching, like the movie. So when you switch from watching the lower resolution menu to the actual video itself that's on the DVD,
won't clock up sync.
It won't sync up correctly.
I've run into that issue on the Sony DVD players.
I ran into that issue.
They did not have HDMI outputs.
At a prior employer's house. Where he had the Sony 777, the ESC,
the changer.
Yeah, the changer. Yeah.
Yep. And
that was component only, but he had an HDMI system,
and it wouldn't work through any of the adapters.
It would not. Now, the video that we found out what was happening because he had a DVD that just there was no menu; it just went straight to the video. That worked every time, but everything else, when you went to the menu and then over to the video, it wouldn't work. If we unplugged it and plugged it back in, it would sync up because everything had a chance to. It was hot plug. It would re-sync up with everything. All that to say, we put an AIO2 on it, or an AIO at the time. It says also, the next part is if using computer sources, the designer should identify if the display EDID includes any desired graphics resolutions in addition to the standard consumer video formats as specified in Annex A.
Now, one other thing, as we have learned. If you're using a computer source, you should set your monitor to computer because it does allow for more flexibility. How do you do that through an AVR? So that you got other sources into?
Well, the AVRs also do that also. You can change the name of the input of whatever input it's plugged into. Do that. We've talked about it before. Make sure that you actually change the name of the input that you're plugged into. on really anything, because in a lot of cases, the manufacturer of the display or the
It
AVR
has triggers based on that.
it has, yeah, it does certain things. So if you go into the canned names on certain
select
things,
PC?
select either computer or PC, it'll change it to looking for an RGB connection, or in some cases a DVI connection, instead of an HDMI or 444 or subsampling, or a YC is what it could be looking for on anything else. Same thing with game consoles. If there's an option for game, change it to game. It does the same thing. There's actually, if in some cases you don't have the option of choosing a pre-loaded thing, still name it PC or computer or or game or something else, because it could still trigger whatever that is. Really kind of interesting how that works. That it's specifically looking for certain equalizations. Let's see. All source, repeater, and display devices, cables, and extenders must be able to support identified bandwidth. See?
Yeah.
See? This section, honestly, is basically the last page, but we're going to actually talk about the last page.
I am a fan of flowcharts.
Yes.
When I design my system, I'm not worried if it's going to be an Apple TV or Google. My sources, my capabilities is this.
Yeah.
Now, what devices do I have to have in line? So what do they have to work with? So I flowchart everything.
Yeah. Randall, you actually make a really good point. Inserting an AVR between a gaming PC and a good monitor could limit your higher refresh rates. That's very true, because in some cases, it may not have that high refresh rate capabilities on the AVR, or it may not have the variable refresh rate option on the AVR.
And unfortunately, the drawback is, particularly if they're using an extender long distance, they can't put the gaming console local.
Yeah.
To the panel. So these are things now, as you're documenting with your client, if he thinks he's going to get 4K 120 and you're going to plug that into an AVR, he's not gonna.
Yeah.
So these are things he needs to understand, because they're not your fault.
Yeah. Some of the other things that they get into when using an active cable or an AOC, or including an AOC, power.
Oh yeah,
power.
You and I are big pushers of that one.
Make sure that the AOC cable either has an external power source or has an ability to add additional power to the HDMI bus.
And if it doesn't add a device that does it like our AIO2.
Yeah, an AIO2 is a perfect fit for that. I think they talk about that in here, but really that's Michael saying, just to make everyone crazy, don't forget about the HDCP version of the different devices.
Well, and so did you get the email from Ray last night?
Yeah.
Now, he was asking about HDCP 2.3, which is a valid request.
Yeah.
Now, it's not, you don't have to worry about with our current, as a rule, our current content.
Right.
But coming?
Yeah.
Now, some of the AVRs are already 2.3 compliant. Most of the new TVs, if they're 4K HDR, blah, 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 or 8K, certainly, are 2.3.
Yep.
And I don't see issues with most extenders, cables being 2.3 compliant, because they don't have, it's agnostic.
Right.
The transfer medium doesn't care.
Right.
But your electronics do. So your AVR, absolutely, because anything that's a full repeater, meaning it has an input and an output that negotiates all this stuff, it has to be able to deal with that HDCP.
Yeah, it really does. And speaking of HDCP, they say the system topology should not exceed the maximum device count and repeater level depth.
Good luck on knowing that.
And again, we talked about that last episode. In section
Denon used to have a chart.
Yeah, 2241 and 2242 in last episode. We talked about that because HDCP isn't just okay, everybody has HDCP. No, it's a key-based system. You have to make sure that both the source device, so again, this goes back to like bar systems where you have a bunch of TVs. You may run into an issue where you have too many displays for the number of keys that source device allows.
Can support.
Yeah, exactly. So you may run into a problem.
Residentially, it's not an issue typically.
Not normally, no.
But it can be in houses of worship if it's big enough, schools, motels, or sports bars.
Yep. So they also talk about where reverse path audio is required. Their recommendation is to use eARC instead of ARC. I am right there with them.
100%.
Yep. And honestly, my recommendation is not using reverse path audio. Is my first recommendation.
Lay in a separate piece of cable unless you got to support Atmos.
Well, not even. Just you put a Roku in. Put a Roku in and just call it done, because the forward path audio is so much simpler than anything else. I understand that we have 8K displays now, and we have possibly 8K streaming services coming in very soon if they're not here already. So you do need to have some reverse path in some cases. However, if you can get away from using HDMI, my recommendation is forward path audio first, Toslink second,
Or digital coax.
ER or digital coax. Well, everything has Toslink. Very rarely do we have digital coax. After that, eARC. Last, absolutely last is ARC.
And boy, if you can do anything to not use ARC.
Yeah. Honestly, I would almost say if you have Bluetooth as an option, use Bluetooth before you use ARC. Because some TVs have Bluetooth. And you may be just within length of getting a Bluetooth signal
Now,
from the TV to the AVR.
I'm gonna... This is not a bad thing to have in your truck.
So...
Because there are just times...
I don't know how that works, though. I don't know what they're doing with that. Are they giving us ARC, Toslink, and then converting it to ARC?
No, they're giving us ARC and converting it to Toslink.
No, it goes the other direction. That plugs into
Right,
the TV.
right. Yeah, the Toslink to ARC.
Right. So, but I don't know if it's doing that or if they're just using that there and then that just auto detects that.
Yep.
So that I don't know, but it could be. It could be.
Now we have D2D converters, which will allow you to take an optical cable and convert it to coax. We also have ARC breakout on switches. So if you have an older AVR, you can do that. We don't have an eARC one yet, but much like everybody else, we're still finding supply chain parts and pieces for new products.
I like this also. Displays often have different HDMI capabilities assigned to different ports.
Really?
Yes.
No.
So it used to be where you would say, okay, this TV is a 4K 120 TV, but only ports 1 and 2 are HDMI 2.1. Now that's gone because everything's 2.1.
But they still could be different capabilities.
It could still be different capabilities. Usually you would see like an ARC port or an eARC port, or you would see something that was a 2.1 port so that it could display 2.1 content, or like from an Xbox
there
Series
was one
X.
that said DVI or PC, even if it had an HDMI port.
Correct. I love this one. Observe product user manuals for source, repeater, and display devices for procedures to activate any functions as necessary.
RTFM?
RTFM.
It should just have, what number is that?
That's it's not even a number. It's the second to last.
That should just have bold letters
just on its own.
RTFM.
Yeah. Upgrade path considerations is the last part that they talk about here. Upgrade path considerations. Honestly, in today's day and age, where everything is increasing at a considerable rate, is key. Honestly, having something in place that you can upgrade in the future, because here's the truth. We are hitting 48 gigs eventually, and there will be something after that. Now, the word on the street has been, are we going to everything's going to be inside the TV and we have to come out of the TV?
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. There's always going to be something that's a source device going to a display.
Because source devices can change quicker than TVs can, and you can add a source device to the TV when your TV's outdated.
Correct.
As far as that app or function goes.
Yeah. So with that said, there's a lot of the considerations for upgrading are out there. You can, honestly, Cat 6 or Cat 6A is a wonderful option for that, because Cat 6 and Cat 6A, in most cases, you are not using anywhere near the bandwidth that it actually has.
It actually can do.
Right. Beyond that, fiber. We are now at the point where almost every job you do, if you're doing a pre-wire for something, or if you're running a category wire from one location to another, run a fiber. Run a fiber with it.
At least, yeah. And we recommend the Siamese.
Yeah, have two runs. Or do we have a Siamese that does? No, we don't. We don't do that. The Siamese, the only Siamese we have is category wire.
No, we have a Siamese.
Not fiber.
I thought we did.
Nope, not fiber. We have a simplex and a duplex fiber that has two fibers.
Okay.
A duplex has two fiber runs on it, but it's not. It's just fiber. It's not fiber and category.
No, but I mean, just run two fibers.
Yeah, run two fibers.
And Siamese, no, Siamese just means two, side by side.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean a fiber and a cat. It just means two of something.
Gabs, you have to let me know. Is it, cheap as chips? Is that?
That's it's a British or Australian comment.
Okay, that's kind of fun. I like that. Fiber is cheap as chips to drop in at the same time. Yes.
And Bob's your uncle.
I want to know what cheap as chips means.
It's right.
Are you laughing back there, John?
Of course he is.
It's been a while since you've heard
He's
it.
Australian. It's Australian.
John, we'll have to call David as well and be like, hey, David,
Well,
what's cheapest chips?
Cheapest chips simply means that it doesn't cost a lot of money, because how much does an order of fries cost? Cheap as chips.
Sure, okay, yeah.
And
yeah, cheapest chips.
fried potatoes elsewhere in the world are called chips.
True. Very true. Okay.
John?
There it is. That's what it is. Okay.
That's
so,
our resident Australian in the background.
Yeah, that's John. So upgrade paths. Honestly, AOC, HDMI AOC.
Yeah, because huge upgrade path.
There's 4 runs of 4 strands of fiber inside of it, inside of our VLOX series, as well as our install bay detachable head shell. There's 4 runs of OM3 fiber, so you can actually color coded, so you can actually cut off the ends and terminate those fiber connections with whatever you need it to be in the future
at the time.
And it's a fiber connection, and it's a full
but it
OM3
works right
bandwidth.
now with either 4 or 8 gigs or 4 or 8 4K or 8K.
You're there. You're getting there.
No, apparently I'm not. It works in either 4K or 8K now, depending on the selection you make. So you're done for today.
Yeah.
And then in the future, clip,
Yep.
re-terminate, and move on.
So we also have the last part of this is 3.3, AV distribution systems. And I know that we are going past this, but I want to get this through here.
Okay.
An AV distribution system can be defined as having 2 or more displays from the same source in the same or different rooms. Such as systems typically exhibit 2 common traits of the presence of distribution equipment, often making multi-format systems and features such as HDR more intricate to manage, and they invariably utilize several long-length cable runs.
There was a lawyer involved in that statement.
That was a long one. So basically what that comes down to is that AV distribution systems are just that. It's a distribution system.
Which is what we do for a living.
Right. Multi-sources through a centralized system or a decentralized system, like if it's an AV over IP, to multiple displays, right? And
I like the way you rolled that decentralized in for the AV. That was very nice.
And again, I'm talking endpoints as well, because you can have something that ends up or a source device that ends up on multiple displays, but also ends up on an AVR, right?
Right.
And so in that case, then the AVR could be the endpoint. It could be the last thing in the line for that signal. Well,
not
technically
really.
The speakers would be the last point in the line for that signal, but that it essentially winds up at the AVR. It gets decompiled and used by the AVR.
You're just full of those multi-syllabic words today, aren't you?
I have a book that Stuart gave me a while back. It's 1,200 words that every person should know to sound smart.
Is it helping?
It's helping.
Okay.
Well, you tell me. I mean,
You're
hopefully I'm
full of
using
multi-syllabic
using the
today.
words right, anyways. Abundance of caution. Yes, Michael, that's a fantastic.
Fear is a good answer.
He's saying treat AOC another way to use the acronym abundance of caution.
Yeah, it's effectively treated just like you would your networking installations. No tight bends.
Nope.
Don't yank too hard on it.
Yep.
Just like you would Cat 5 or Cat 6. Be careful with it. Don't step on it. Don't lay it on top of the rafters for the plumber and the electrician to step on.
So you read that in a different way than I did. I read that as an abundance of caution, as though it's in the future. You can use what it is as something else in the future if you run into a problem.
I look at it today. What are they going to do to? What are the other trades going to do to break me?
How many times have they broken it, or how many times have your technicians ran, or yourself ran a cable backwards?
Okay, number one, I personally, honestly, have never run a cable backwards.
You've never run a cable backwards.
Because I'm the one taking the tech calls and laughing at the guys when they do. However, we've had, on a job site that you and I both know, cables damaged.
Yeah. Symphony, I know the problems you're talking about, and I feel you. But anyways, yeah. So when you're talking about AV distribution systems, the way that they put it here is all the same design considerations covered in section 3.2, which is what we just went over, should be factored for distribution systems. It's just now
there's more of it.
There's more. There's so much more.
Right, and we're back to abundance of caution is a good statement, because it's not just where we're going to go, how we're going to lay the wires in, but now we have to figure in the HDCP keys, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
We have to figure in the multiple display EDIDs.
Yes.
And that can be incredibly problematic. We have to figure in multiple resolutions. Forget the EDIDs. Now we have a 4K 120 and an 8K.
Yep.
2 different TVs. If they got a Samsung and an LG or a Sony, they're not just different EDIDs, they're entirely different panel properties.
When you design a system or a distribution system, a video distribution or an AV distribution system, highest common denominator should be a phrase that you use constantly.
Highest common denominator.
Highest
the
common
only
denominator.
thing that's not going to change regularly in a system like that is the speaker wire and the in-wall speakers.
So the highest common denominator for me, the meaning that I have with that is, if you have an 8K TV, an 8K60 TV, you have a 4K 120 TV, you have a 4K 60 TV, you have a 1080p TV, and you have a 720p TV, well, guess what? That 8K TV, in most cases, big, giant quotations, most cases can display a 720p picture.
Yes.
Right? Everything from that 8K TV all the way down to that 720p TV can view or display a 720p image or signal.
Right, in theory.
So in theory, what that means is that 720p is your highest common denominator.
Right.
Right?
As a source.
As a source. Everybody, all the displays, every display can view or display 720p.
But not everyone can display 1080 or 4K or 8K.
Correct. So in that case, what that does is you can say, okay, yeah, client, I can give you the same content on every single display. Just be aware, it's all going to be 720. That's usually the easiest. Now, there's other ways to get around that, of course, if you do things like our
splitter with the built-in scalers.
Yep, which will then scale it down from whatever it is. You'll get my bill in the mail.
How is it you get all the good jokes? I'm standing over here and I don't.
I know. So
we're going to reverse this next time.
Yeah, well, I'll give you the chat on there. That's actually frightening. No, I'm not going to give you the chat.
I want the chat, and I want it in big fonts because I'm old and blind.
I don't know about that. So everybody, we are well past our time limit for today's episode. We need to go ahead and cut this off.
Is there anything left in Section 4 you did not cover?
There's Section 3. There's one last thing that they talk about with the AV distribution systems, and that's EDID management. So we have inside of our matrices an EDID manager, and it's wonderful because what it allows you to do is it allows you to tell the source devices what they are connected to. What I mean by that is you can say, okay, I have 3 4K TVs and I have one 1080p TV, right? If I have those 3 4K TVs and one 1080p, I can either tell the source device, or in some cases I can't, because the source device in many cases will just do whatever it wants to do. It's automatic. But if I tell that if I tell that source device that you are connected to a 1080p display, it will only give you 1080p, unless someone goes in behind you and sets it to 4K,
which they
and
will.
Forces it, which they will. You'll get the phone call. But doing that allows you to make sure and allow you to manage that system to make sure that everything stays where it's supposed to be.
Now, see, I disagree with you on that.
Okay.
Here's how I would do it. I would take our matrix, because it's a great matrix. I would set it at 4K, then I would put one of our 1.1.1x2 scaling splitters on the output of the lower resolution one.
And just scale it down.
And let it negotiate there. That way, all the 4K TVs, that means one extra product.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yep.
But it allows them to maintain that 4K capability on all the other sets.
Another thing that you can do with that design theory or that design philosophy as well is you can say, like inside of Control 4 or Crestron or whatever, you get to tell the system what that display is allowed to access.
That's
as
true,
a source.
because we can send specific commands.
Right. So what you can say is, okay, I have 2 Rokus, right, or two media streamers. One of them is getting an EDID from the matrix that's 4K. The other one's getting a 1080p EDID. So that means that the display that is 1080p, I'm going to make sure that through my control system, it only is allowed to view the 1080p source. Then the rest of them, the 4K sources or 4K displays, can view all of them, because I know that they can view the 1080p, but they can also view the 4K.
That's all well and good until you run into audio differences due to processing times and.
Well, and luckily, most of that is, in many cases, you don't have to worry too much about that. And nowadays, it's a lot better than what it used to be, where you would have to worry about lip syncing issues. They've really fixed a lot of that. Get with the times, old man.
I love your optimism.
You will run into problems somewhere. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Next week, we're doing the final episode on this series. The last part that we're going to be talking about is Section 4, and I believe
5?
A little tiny bit of 5. But what they fall under is troubleshooting, and we've actually done a troubleshooting episode.
And we're pretty good at troubleshooting.
And we're pretty good at troubleshooting. Mostly what that comes down to is...
Modest, I might add.
Yeah, of course. The most modest. There's no one more modest than us. All that to say...
I got to walk away on that one. I can't maintain.
That was good, right?
I can't maintain a straight face.
I'm on top of the world right now. Section 4 and Section 5 is literally our job. That is literally our job. Troubleshooting. If you run into a problem, give us a call, shoot us an email. You've got both my phone number, Brent's phone number, as well as both of our email addresses. You can also call into our tech support line at 386-492-8584. That's there at the bottom of the screen here. On that screen and on the bottom of the screen here. 386-492-8584. If you have questions, give us a call, shoot us an email. We'll be happy to help out in any way that we can. We can point you in the direction of what devices will help your problem.
And if we don't sell it, we'll help you find out what the correct answer is. And we don't sell every device.
Well, in full disclosure, if we have a device that will fix your problem, we're going to recommend that device. But if we don't, we're going to help you find the right solution for it. Because honestly, that's kind of where we come in. We love fixing problems. That's kind of what we do.
And we're not sales.
True. Yeah, true. So... everybody, thank you so much for checking in with today's episode. I know that it was a long one, and I know it's a pretty long-winded one. I tried to get through it as quick as I possibly could. This last episode, we were going to we're going to get to a little bit of troubleshooting, and then the last part of it's going to be the system design checklist.
Ooh.
And maybe we'll do a little bit of role play. Maybe this time, because
I'm not wearing a dress this time.
You are always the client. I want to be the client this time.
Ooh. I get to be the boss?
I'm going to be... No, I'm the boss. I'm the client. So...
thank you for joining us.
Actually, better yet, here's to the few people that are watching. Put in the comments, put in the chat, put in wherever, shoot me an email.
What color dress do you want to see, man?
Yeah, give me the system design as a client. Tell
criteria.
me what give me the system criteria that you would want to have.
So now you're really
going
to put me on a spot.
Oh, I'm hoping that we get a really good one. I really am. I'm going to push for this one. Give us a system design that, as a client, to come at us like you're a client. Be like, I want this, 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 and this. I want it to be able to do this. Specifically on an HDMI, because of course that's what we're talking about with HDMI. Not
Are we
so much
asking
about
for dollar
programming.
value as well?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no. Just give us a requirement, system design requirements that you would have as a client if you were that client.
Okay, now you're going to have to, we need to know how many rooms, square footage, not brands, just sources and displays, unless a brand sticks in your mind, I got to have this for this reason.
Yeah. Yeah, give me
because that does impact what we do at this end.
That reason could be something as silly as I saw it on AVS forums, and the person that I was reading said they had a wonderful time with it. They said that they hated this one, and I will not touch it.
And that is a very fair statement.
It happens.
Yes,
happens.
it does.
So, everybody, thank you so much for watching today. If you have questions about whatever it is that we've talked about today, of course, leave it in the comment section if you're watching this after the fact. We'll be shutting down the chat here in just a second when we get off the video, so it's probably too late. But leave it down in the comments. Reach out to us directly on our phone numbers here or our email addresses. Mine is adam.rogers@metroav.
Brent.mccall at MetroAV.
386-202-6132 or 6137 for Brent.
And it follows us anywhere?
Yes, it does. So with that said, everybody, thank you for watching us. Check out next Wednesday where we're going to finish up this series. Come back Friday where we're going to talk about one of our devices that goes along with what we talked about today.
You know what we're going to talk about?
What are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about the Matrix with EDID management.
That's a pretty good one. Cool.
That's what we're going to talk about. And we're also going to mention the SPL5s because that is a great solution to what we discussed in system design matching up resolutions.
SPL.
Any of the splitters with the SPL5s.
Scalers, yes. So with that said, come back on Friday, watch that video, come back next week. We're going to finish this out. If you haven't signed up for CEDIA,
please
do so. Go on there and download this document. The document's free. Signing up is free. They do have some paid services or some paid documents that you can get into. But honestly, if you are serious about this industry, it's worth it. It definitely is.
You know, the organization catches a lot of flack, but they do a lot for us, both in legal work and in dealing with state governments, Washington, to try to protect our interest as integrators.
Yeah. So with that said, Brent.
I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
Turn off your... Wow. I just completely
Are you there?
vapor. No, I'm not. You start.
Reboot early.
Reboot often.
Turn on. Sorry. Cut your wire. Don't cut your wires too short.
Cut your wire too darn short. Don't cut. Turn off CEC.
And call tech support.
And hopefully we'll do better.
Bye, everybody.